Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about this very important interview given to CNN to Zakaria and the Prime Minister, Mr. Imran Khan, in fact emphasized on a couple of very important regional as well as global issues. He did talk about the issue of Kashmir and the kind of problems that are being faced by the Muslims living in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. On the other hand, he also talked about the Afghan issue, and he said that, well, sooner or later, the Western countries will eventually recognize the Taliban government. And he also said that whatever has happened so far out there, perhaps it is the problem of the Americans. At the end of the day, what we have noticed now, that whatever weapons were left, it is generally believed that those weapons were worth around $85 billion. And now they are not only with the Taliban, but so many other factions also. And the recent wave of terrorism that we have witnessed in the province of Balochistan, whether you talk about Panjgur or other areas, those were the American weapons. Either they were the M16 rifles or the sniper rifles or otherwise, these were all made in America, and these were the weapons which were left behind in Afghanistan once the exit took place. At the same time, another very important factor is perhaps about the overall humanitarian issue in Afghanistan. It is believed that almost 80% of the Afghan population is at a verge of almost dire states, and it is generally believed that there is lack of food, lack of clean drinking water, lack of health facilities. Whether you talk about other similar issues, there is no banking system out there, it has collapsed as well. But now we have also learned that the American, perhaps the kind of money they have, the money of the Afghan government, remember, they believe that half of it should be given to the victims of 9/11. And they'll see what about the rest of it. Perhaps they will be given to the Afghan government, and at the end of the day, things will settle down, but still, situation is not that great. A lot of issues have also risen after the interview. The Prime Minister very categorically told the person who was taking the interview, Mr. Zakaria, that the problem is created by the Americans. They have created more terrorists as compared to sorting out issues. Now, this is something of prime concern, but let's see, before I introduce you to our panelists, we have two sound bites. One is regarding Afghanistan. Let's hear that out first.
People in the US must understand one thing. Disliking Taliban government is one thing, but it's a question of 40 million, almost 40 million Afghans. Half of them are in a very precarious situation. So there's hunger, there's Afghan winters is extremely wicked, ruthless. And so they're facing winter, the food shortages, malnutrition. The next couple of months, everyone is worried that they could be one of the worst, or already developing into one of the worst humanitarian crises.
This was about the Afghan issue, where he in fact very categorically mentioned that the situation isn't that great. Humanitarian crisis is the biggest problem currently being faced by the Afghan people. And let's see what the Prime Minister had to say about the Kashmir issue.
Kashmir is a disputed territory between Pakistan and India. Over the last 35 years, approximately, the figure varies, about 100,000 Kashmiris have died. Since 5th August 2019, the Indians have revoked the status of Kashmir, which unilaterally, which is, according to the United Nations Security Council, a disputed territory between Pakistan and India. There are extrajudicial killings going on. There are no rights there. There's clampdown there. There are 800,000 Indian troops in the Kashmir Valley.
So, now let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us in our studio, on my right is Raoof Hassan Saab, needs to introduction, is the Special Assistant to the Prime Minister on Information and Broadcasting. Thank you so much, sir, for your time.
Pleasure.
Always a pleasure to have you on the show, sir. And we also have with us Hassan Khan Saab, expert on Afghan affairs. Thank you so much, Khan Saab, for your presence as well. Now, sir, Prime Minister has very categorically mentioned about the situation in two different areas. Let's talk about Afghan issue first, sir. Taliban government, whether good, bad or ugly, sir, it's a separate issue. But sir, when we talk about the humanitarian issue, I think that should be the first and the foremost. Unfortunately, the Western world in particular, sir, whether you talk about Europe or United States of America or perhaps even Canada, they are not understanding the magnitude of the issue, sir. Just imagine people who are starving, are living in tents where the temperature is -10 to -15. This is what the situation is like, sir. No medical facilities. People have absolute uncertainty about what tomorrow is going to bring to them. Let's start off from there, sir.
Well, I think the Prime Minister has very candidly communicated to the world that time has come for them to undertake a serious review of the stance that they have adopted since the takeover in Afghanistan by the Taliban, and quite correctly pointed out that it's primarily a humanitarian crisis of immense proportions. Like you have said, over 40 million people, virtually on the verge of starvation. So the world must look at it in a totally different perspective. The other thing is that, well, disliking the Taliban is one thing, you see, but principally it concerns the Afghans. And all Afghans are not Taliban. They're human beings. They may belong to various beliefs, various sects, various proclivities.
Correct.
They're not Taliban. So if if America in particular, aided and abetted by the rest of the Western world, is out to wedge itself on the Taliban, and the fact, that they were instrumental in kicking them out of Afghanistan after almost 21 years of a useless war, then they should not extend that revenge spree to all of Afghans. So I think the basic premise is all flawed. The fact that they attacked Afghanistan back in 2001 is not because of the fact that what happened on 9/11 was because of the Afghans. There was no Afghan in that. People who attacked America on 9/11, they belonged to another country. That country was, of course, not even touched. The fact that the stayed there for 21 years, it was not to reconstruct Afghanistan along any pragmatic lines, or there was any investment in building the welfare of the people there. For 21 years basically, and I brought this here, it is called At War with the Truth. And this contains what happened in those 21 years, how the Western world, led by the Americans, played havoc with Afghanistan, how it was destroyed, imposing a system that was alien to them.
It was a playground for the US military industrial complex.
Yeah, that's right. A system that was alien to the Afghans through stooges like Karzai and Ghani later on. So they wanted to just hold on to it as part of a larger game plan. And that larger game plan, as I have repeatedly said in my articles as well as in my talks, is contain China policy. So they wanted to use this base to perpetuate that contain China policy. And unfortunately, things developed in such a way that they were not able to retain it beyond 21 years. Otherwise, they would not have gone from there. Now, the more important part is that I think we have not discussed. That is that this increasing effort to destabilize or keep the region destabilized also has a method behind it. It's not without that method that instances of terror have increased in this part of the world, in this region. And the Prime Minister was very correct, has very correctly pointed it out, that America was number one, brought terror to this part of the world. And America has left increased magnitude of terror behind. It is responsible for both.
They have never been a part of the solution. They have always been a part of the problem.
And in fact, you can go to other countries. What they have done in so many other countries, Muslim countries, in the Middle East and around the world. I mean, and there is no accountability at all. I mean, I just cite one example. What happened in Iraq? The weapons of mass destruction premises, basically. I mean, presentation was made at the United Nations Security Council by no less a person than the Secretary.
Colin Powell was there, yeah.
And you attack a country, you destroy that country, and there's nobody to ask you, why did you do it? On a false premise.
And what about those weapons of mass destruction?
And so many other things, basically, one can go on. So Afghanistan is no exception. The fact is that we have to live with Afghanistan. And it was a very pragmatic conversation that the Prime Minister had with Fareed Zakaria. And I think, hating Afghanistan, hating Taliban is one thing, but for God's sake, don't spread it to all of Afghan people who are, like you said, is virtually on the verge of starvation. So, the world must, particularly the so-called civilized world, I mean, we are referred to as the barbarians. The so-called civilized world need to review its approach and attitude towards people who are in dire need of help, not only from Pakistan or from the regional countries, but from the rest of the world also. And this thing that you've talked about, their money. Now they say that it's 7 billion, according to one estimate, it was about 9.5 billion. So we will know in due course of time. But 7 billion people, half of that, they say will be spent on Afghan people, but not given to Afghan government. So who is going to spend it on Afghan people? And what is the guarantee that that money will actually be spent on the Afghan people welfare? The other half is going to the effectees of 9/11. As I said earlier, it is not because of the Afghans that the attacks took place. I mean, if you're interested in reparations, then please go to people who caused it.
Whenever you get into the details of 9/11 incident, it seems that a lot of people believe that it was an inside job, and it seems like there are a lot of people also believe that 9/11 was perhaps a reason, which was created so that the Americans can have their footprint in Afghanistan, because we had never heard about Osama bin Laden. Yeah, we knew that there is this man who is from the bin Laden family, very rich man. Their main business is construction. Eventually, that man was involved in bombing in Africa and so on and so forth. But eventually, what happened was that within no time, 9/11, and I remember 7th of October, they attacked with all the guns blazing. And they were there for 21 years, could not achieve the targets they had in their mind. They were just there to try out all sorts of bombs they had invented, all sorts of artillery, all sorts of jets they had in action. But the point is, at the end of the day, now it's very clear that they had other objectives, exactly as mentioned by Raoof Hassan Saab, to contain China, not to let them go towards the West. And because if there is a problem in a country like Afghanistan, nothing is going to happen. But so let's talk about 2022 now. The thing is that they have left behind weapons worth of around 83 to 85 billion dollars, as they say. And I always had this feeling that these weapons will not only be with the Taliban forces, but perhaps with so many other splinter groups. And whatever happened on the bordering area of Pakistan, where the snipers, in fact, charged on our forces, and our Jawans had no clue where the fire was coming from. A, they had silencers. Secondly, they had long range. So that is something which is of prime concern. Now, sir, looking at the current situation, do you think that the situation is going to be sorted out without the full support of the Western world, A? And if not, who is going to play the major role? Because at the end of the day, whether we like it or we don't, Khan Saab, Pakistan is going to suffer.
Thank you very much, Faisal. I think this is, I agree as Raoof Hassan Saab has said it, it seems that there is a method behind this madness. So definitely you also mentioned in your comments that it is not proven that whether it was staged or not, but the way 9/11 was used to attack Afghanistan, I think that was quite unfortunate. Of all the terrorists, let's say, who presumably attacked the Empire State Building, none of them were Afghan. Even the planning was not done in Afghanistan. So, and I think the target was made Afghanistan. So I think these are quite unfortunate facts. Now these are facts because they attacked Afghanistan and they were having a license to kill, shot up atom bomb. I think they used all their weaponries in Afghanistan.
Mother of all bombs?
The mother of all bombs. So shot up atom bomb, as I said. They used all their weapons, unfortunately, un-Afghan people. And Afghans, I think, people were saying they were there for reconstructions or rehabilitations. I think there is neither rehabilitation, there is neither reconstructions in the last in the 20 years when they were there in Afghanistan. I think coming to the Prime Minister's statement, the Prime Minister's interview, I think for the way Prime Minister was speaking, doesn't look like to be a head of a government like Pakistan, because he was quite categorical, he was quite straight, and he was telling all the facts without, I think, even imagining that what will be the reaction from the world superpower. Already, we have not that good relations with their superpower since they quit the region. So I think the way he presented the case of Afghan, I think even Afghans could not have done it the way Prime Minister said these things, and said it on straight face without mincing words. So for me, when I was
Not even post the US exit, even prior to that.
even
He
prior
was
to that.
labeled as Taliban Khan, if you remember.
Yeah, definitely, and he is right in saying that I was the person who was always telling that this war has only one solution, and that is a dialogue. We can sit on a table and the table talks, I think. But coming to this, the US President executive order regarding the distribution of Afghan money, I think there are two statements coming out. One statement was of Taliban and the other is from the Chinese Foreign Office. The Chinese, I think, bluntly said it that it's just like a dacoity on the poor man's wealth. And the world wealthiest country is taking the money of the world poorest country. So I think this is, look at the...
That's said by Barnett Tubal.
Yeah.
You're quoting Barnett Tubal.
Yeah, so yes, this is, and then what Taliban has said, Taliban said, it shows the akhlaqi pasti of the world superpower, how I think how low they can go.
But sir, in today's diplomacy, morals, values, ethics, these
But
things
here,
do not exist.
here the case is different, I think. You know, the world is, and I was quite happy when I saw one US senator who she was condemning it while in the street, protesting in the street. I think more voices will now gather gradually. Definitely, I think, look, Faisal, I think this is, it is quite, I think, heart-aching that, you know, today Afghans are dying. They are dying of hunger. They are dying of diseases. 20 million people are living below the poverty line. Extreme, they are living in extreme poverty. They have been hit by 4 decades of war. And it was you who used all your weapons for almost 20 years. And now you are taking their money. So I think for a world superpower, for a country who say that, calling it a symbol of human rights, symbol of democracy, and so I think this is quite unfortunate. I think we need to give credit to the Prime Minister. Why Prime Minister was saying it, I think this is an important question. What he said, this is one thing. Why he said it, and I think that is where the real elephant lies, and that is, look, if Afghanistan, God forbid, if it fall into chaos, so who will be the sufferer? Who will be the major sufferer? It will be the region, but Pakistan will be the... Even today, we are hosting more than 3 million, almost 3 million refugees.
Afghan refugees, correct.
Since August till date, I think it is 0.4 million, 4 lakh Afghans have crossed the border, and they are there. They are here in Pakistan. The Prime Minister said thousands of Afghans are daily coming to Pakistan. So God forbid if it fall into chaos. And what is the alternative? I think to be realistic, it is not that I am supporting Taliban. It is not that you are supporting Taliban. It is to be a bit realistic. Okay, if not Taliban, then who else? And how you will bring, because you fought against Taliban for 20 years, you negotiated peace with Taliban for 2 years, and now when they are in Kabul, you call them wonderful boys. You know, the US President Donald Trump called Taliban leaders as wonderful boys. So you, from the character of Gothic novels, you upgraded their standard to the wonderful boys, and the US President was calling them to come to the US and
Ronald Reagan, you know, in fact, compared them with their founding members.
They were different. After that, Taliban were called characters from Gothic novels. But after 20 years, when President Trump, when they were negotiating for 2 years through via Zalmay Khalilzad, then President Trump said that these are wonderful boys. It was just dawned upon him that they're so good and so eloquent and such a great people. But unfortunately, when they entered Kabul and you left, then you got. Then this is a sheer. I think I agree with Raoof Hassan Saab that it is a sheer, I think, revenge. It's nothing else.
All right. Now, Raoof, another very important factor when the Prime Minister says that, you know, at the end of the day, the international, I would say, forces, especially the Western world, they would recognize the regime of the Taliban. Well, sir, sooner or later, this is what he has said. And at the same time, he has also mentioned that the Taliban should be recognized because at the end of the day, if the Americans have in fact opened up to any particular group, that was the Taliban, they were in opposition, now they're in power. But having said that, so the kind of support we all thought the Americans are going to give them to stabilize the region, that doesn't exist. And it won't be there anymore, sir, because obviously every country has a different narrative, every country has a different approach. But sir, looking at today's America, looking at what they have done all over, I mean, you start off from Far East to Middle East to Afghanistan to you name it. And they have been, I think they have been the destroyers. This is not the way to move forward, sir. The kind of money they have spent in Afghanistan, according to the American statistics, I mean, it's unbelievable. I think if that money was spent on the entire Asia, things would have been so different. Where did that money go? Obviously, we all know there were few individuals or certain companies who got benefited. But, sir, now the Americans still believe that hardly $7 billion or even half of it, if it is given, that is not even going to look after the affairs for 8 to 10 months. That's it. But, sir.
And just to add one thing, sorry, Raoof, you also keep the way US spent its money for 20 years in Afghanistan. They say that we spent more than 100 billions.
2 trillion.
2.2 trillion is one figure.
So the way they spent the 2.3 trillion in Afghanistan, so definitely if the same way they carry this money of let's say let's make it 3 billions, I think who will, you rightly said it, that if not Taliban government.
Sir, 3 trillion
so also keep that factors in mind.
10 times bigger than the economy of Pakistan. That is the kind of money, Raoof Sahab, we're talking about. So, sir, I think there is some other hidden agenda. Perhaps they really want to keep the region in chaos so that the expansion of Chinese could be looked after, their presence in one way or the other. A lot of people believe that the forces and men in uniform, they have left, but a lot of contractors, they still continue to live in Afghanistan. So if that is the case, then the problem is right across the border, sir, and perhaps whatever is happening because of that. And again, the Indian-American alignment, I mean, that should be considered something of prime concern.
Well, there's a war that is waged by using very sophisticated weapons. And there is a war, another kind of war, which is now being waged, which is far more lethal than the one waged with weapons, destructive weapons. That is by the veritable arms, as I call it, of the American imperialism and the Western imperialism. You must have heard of a place, of an institution called FATF. You must have heard of another institution called United Nations. Or you must have heard of the World Bank, you must have heard of the IMF, and so many other such institutions, which are in the exclusive control of the Western neo-imperialist, I call them basically, and they are used against countries like Pakistan who don't fall in line because of morally upright leaderships that they have. Like in this country, fortunately, we have Prime Minister Khan, who's taking a position for Pakistan, which really, unfortunately, in over 70 years of our history is a rare commodity, has been a rare commodity. So, we are on the one hand, we are under the assault of these veritable arms of Western imperialisms, and on the other hand, we are under assault by the remnants of terror which have been left behind, and that is what you were referring to in the intermediary when you were talking about the attacks in Balochistan, using the most sophisticated weapons, like you said, M16, M4 was there, of course. There were snipers. And they had silencers, and they were being used from a fair distance, so people did not know what was happening actually. But I must salute the bravery of those people who stood it out. We lost so many people, so many shuhada, and yet they did not give ground. So this is incredible. A nation which has such reservoir, immense reservoir of spirit and energy, it's very difficult to defeat them. And I think this may be late in the day, but we are evolving into becoming a formidable outfit in this country. Whenever that aside, we can discuss it some other time. Mm-hmm. It's a very delicate situation that we are experiencing at this moment in time. As I said, we are fighting on two fronts: economic front and the military front. I am sure the military front would be easier to overcome. We will do that. We have done it in the past. We will do it again. and I suppose that we have friends across the western border also. They will definitely extend as much cooperation as is possible under the circumstances, because it's a regime. You see, and this actually, I should have started somewhere
Do you
else.
think so they have the capacity to look after the affairs, the Afghan regime?
Is that there are two ways to go about. There were two ways to go about dealing with the Taliban. One was a policy of confrontation, which is what the West has adopted. The other was the policy of engagement, which is what Prime Minister Khan had been advocating. And in fact, not just after the takeover of the Taliban, he has been advocating this policy from a long time ago. Basically, he said the only way to overcome the issue of Afghanistan, the war in Afghanistan, is by sitting across the table and coming to an understanding. That means engagement with them. What did the Americans do? Now, here I come to pointing out another duplicitous approach by the West. Who actually legitimized the Taliban in this second coming of Taliban? It was that the Americans, basically, they sat across, like my friend Hassan said, that sat across the table for about 1.5 years plus, and then they signed a deal with them that you will not allow the use of Afghan soil for any terrorist activity, and we withdraw. What is this? You don't sign a deal, with a non-entity. You accepted the reality of Taliban, you legitimized the reality of Taliban, and you withdrew. And the moment you withdrew, you've opened your guns on the Taliban again. You have opened your guns on the Afghan people again. What kind of hypocrisy is this? So the best way to
hypocrisy
go,
of
to move
highest
forward,
order.
the best way to move forward, with Afghanistan and with the Taliban, is to sit across and negotiate with them. Basically, see, in case my friend is a Pashtun, ethnically a Pashtun, he would possibly be able to tell you much more about the temperament of the Pashtun. If you force them, if you pressurize them, you can never.
They will retaliate.
Never. You sit across the table, talk to them with understanding and affection. They will give their life. So the policy that they have chosen to deal with the Taliban, they can never get their way. While on the other hand, the policy that we have advocated, and other countries of the region have advocated, which is a policy of engagement and reconciliation, is the only policy that can work. So, the sooner they do it, the better it would be for Afghanistan, for this region, as well as for the rest of the world. Unless, of course, as I say, and I've written on this, unless, of course, the game plan is totally different, and it is not Afghanistan. Afghanistan is only being used as an excuse. And I believe in that theory. I believe in that theory that the game plan is different. And the game plan is not Afghanistan. The game plan is not. The destabilization or continued destabilization of Afghanistan and consequently of the region is with a purpose.
To destabilize Pakistan and Iran?
That purpose is that keep this region destabilized so that China remains focused here and it cannot focus on things that, according to their understanding, it would like to focus on, which is what the region also wants. Because, if China sort of, deals with the countries of the region, like it is, like CPAC and, the Belt and Road Initiative, the entire region is going to benefit. Afghanistan has also been offered to join the CPAC thing, so they all. So there's another article that I wrote, and I refer to this part of the world, this part of the region, basically, as the up and coming economic powerhouse of the world, stretching from China, starting at China, going to Pakistan, you take Iran, you take Turkey, you take Afghanistan, Central Asia, and ending in Russia. And Russia and China, as you saw at the Winter Olympics, basically, have come much closer than they were in the past. It's a massive economic powerhouse in the world. This is what the Americans are afraid of. This is the real threat to them. It is not the weapons that this part of the world has. Nobody wants to fight a war with America. Why should we fight a war with America? Why should even China fight a war with America? China is going up without fighting a war. In fact, it's the Americans who try to expand their empire by fighting. And I would refer to someone who asked former President Carter, why is it that we are going down and China is coming up? So he questioned, he said, well, tell me the number of years that America has not been at war. So he counted a few. And now tell me the number
years
of
without
years.
the war.
So now tell me how many years the Chinese have been at war.
Not at
Never.
all.
So you see, this is the difference of approach of the two countries, basically. Americans are persisting with their approach. Chinese will persist with their approach. They will persist with fighting and destabilizing the world. Chinese will persist with investing economically and helping other countries to grow up and consequently help China grow. So these are two diametrically opposite approaches.
Yeah, and look at what is happening in Ukraine for that matter. The Ukrainian people do not want a war. they want peace. But the Western world is
West is
forcing them
telling
and then
them
trying to
that,
create a narrative. I mean, this is exactly what Vladimir Putin
And now the new
has
word,
said.
they will surprise you. The Russian will surprise
So
you
the
by
Russian
attacking
army
you.
should not be taken lightly. They mean business, and they have fought wars. They have defended their territory. Americans have never ever fought a war on their own territory. Remember that.
They were
I
very
think
fortunate.
one was I think the Pearl Harbor attack in the Pacific, and I think that is again something, you know. We can
Like
have a
9/11.
long debate that why it wasn't guarded so well, and
Like
perhaps they
9/11.
wanted that to happen. And the second was 9/11, and again like you know, hijacking 4 planes and then targeting. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me, at least, but that's the way it is. Now, coming to the Kashmir issue, now the Prime Minister has always been very vocal, whether you talk about the United Nations platform or otherwise. He's always advocated for Kashmir. Now, we all know what is happening out there. The recent incident in Karnataka, I mean, that tells you the story. It's not only limited to Kashmir anymore, sir. It is about those 25 crore Muslims living in India. They are considered as a minority, and these extremist Hindus will go after them. This is a reality. Now, looking at that kind of a situation, when Mr. Fareed Zakaria, in fact, compared the situation in Kashmir with these, you know, he compared it with Uyghur Muslims, you know. The problem is that our ambassador is there to tell us exactly what is going on. And there is no comparison, to be very honest. But the point is that when the Muslims are being targeted and they are shown as terrorists, Kashmiris are shown as, to me, it seems that India is not considering the people or the Kashmiris. They are more interested in the land, the Kashmir area in general. Now, let's start off from there, sir. Straightforward statements, perhaps a very clear narrative of the Prime Minister. But again, that is creating a lot of differences between the Pakistani government and perhaps the Indians. We are very much on the same page with the Chinese, but it seems that, you know, at some stage, this could trigger into something which the entire region cannot afford.
I think, Faisal, look, I think the world is now definitely, it's getting reshaped, and it's no more a unipolar world as it was. And I think it's not the US or the West which will be dictating the new world
So
order.
we still see the unilateral decisions taken by the Americans. I mean, the West always puts countries like China or Russia, you know, they would put sanctions in them.
Yeah, definitely.
The Chinese or the Russians are not doing that.
I think old habit
isn't
die
it
hard.
a surprise for you to see that the Britishers are thinking of putting certain level of sanctions on the Russians? But that's the way.
Think look at why I'm saying it. Look at this Ukraine, the West. There are other voices from the West also. Though the voices are not so high, but still there are other voices on the Ukraine. It's not completely in line with the US one. And coming to I think this the Chinese Xinjiang issue and the Muslims and the Kashmir. I think this is there is no comparison in it. The whole world, even the UN recognized, even the UN has a number of resolutions about the Indian atrocities in Kashmir. Then I think it's taking from the New Zealand up to the whole globe. No country will, I think, will not be aware what's going on in Indian held Kashmir. It's quite unfortunate. And I think this question is quite irritating. Most of the time, the Western media, they are this issue of human rights in China, particularly with the Muslims. I think they know asking this question purposely, keeping in view the Pakistan-Chinese relation, the growing relations. Already the relations are no more just in political rhetoric, specifically as mentioned by Raoof of this CPEC. It has now gone deeper into Pakistan. I think it's no more in the bigger cities, it's now gone to the villages. And now Afghanistan, the whole region is getting connected with this policy of one road, one belt initiative of the OBR, of the Chinese. So I think now if you have no other issue, so this is called a dog wagging the tail, or tail wagging the dog. I think the dog. Here the problem is now they are creating one. And there is no doubt in it that the US and the Western media is very much popular, as they have attacked Afghanistan on flimsy grounds, weapons of mass destruction. They destroyed Libya using this media powers. They attacked they tried to reshape the whole Middle East using
And they did it.
this power. Afghanistan, they used this media power. So definitely they are creating now an environment. And you know, the US broadcast in almost every language of the world. I'm most of the time I watch and I listen to the Voice of America, the way they are giving news about the Xinjiang issue in languages, in local language, like in Pashto, in Urdu, and Punjabi, or in Dari, etc. So I think now they are creating a situations. They are what you call it? They give a dog a bad name and kill it, like a policy that they are trying to pursue. But I think this time it's not going to work. You know, as mentioned by Raoof Saab, this Winter Olympics in Chinese, they brought the Russian and the Chinese very much closer. The Chinese president was there. He participated in the inaugural ceremony. The prime minister, after going to China, now he is visiting Moscow, I think the second or third week of this, last week of this month. So I think the situation is not the whole narrative is not in their hands, I think. It was a few years ago, decades ago, the narrative building, the narrative shaping, and the narrative formation, it was in the total control of the Western media or the US media. I think now people have realized, especially with the coming up of the social media. And look at how the Prime Minister is defending the case. He's not saying that, I'm not saying it out of the just knowing nothing. We have sent our ambassadors who was in China. We send him to the area and see the ground situation, and he is back with a very different story. The story which is totally different from what the Western media is propagating. So I think putting Kashmir and the Xinjiang issue in the same basket, it's too much. And I think as far the US and the West is concerned, they need India at the moment in the region, because definitely they have worked a lot on India.
I still remember when Donald Trump took charge, he said, well, we have got India to look after the affairs in Pakistan. So he was very straight. Now coming to you, sir, now since Khan Sahab just mentioned about this upcoming visit of the Prime Minister to Russia, so this is going to take place after almost 22, 23 years. How important would that be, sir? And obviously, sir, whether we believe it or we don't, at the end of the day, sir, the President, Mr. Vladimir Putin, who has served in so many capacities, whether as a man in uniform or as the KGB chief or a prime minister or the president, or I would say that he's a statesman. I mean, he means business. So that role which Pakistan played along with the Americans, and eventually we all saw Soviet Union disintegrated, 6 states in the European side, 6, 7 states down in the south. I mean, they all got separated. And out of one, I would say, rest are under the influence of the Europeans and the Americans, other than Belarus. That is also what we have witnessed. Sir, do you think this is going to bring these two countries closer? Obviously, we do talk about the North-South gas pipeline and so many other areas where they can work together. And obviously, sir, another very surprising number was the trade between China and Russia. It has exceeded $200 billion. And perhaps they don't want to even look towards the Germans or the Europeans to give their gas. They have got other options as well now. Obviously, if they are tilting towards the Americans or Qatar for that matter. My point now, sir, is that looking at the current situation, sir, where I can see whether the Prime Minister says that we want to keep an equilibrium, we want to keep a balance between the West and the Chinese and the Russians. But, sir, having said that, when a Prime Minister gives a statement which is very anti-American and another statement comes in which is very pro-Russia or pro-China for that matter, so what sort of problems do you see are brewing for the Prime Minister? And secondly, sir, this kind of an approach, don't you think this is in total contradiction with what he believes in? Because if you want to keep balance, then you have to make sure that your statements should be very calculated and should be very much, you know, in the diplomatic tone. But over here, he would pinpoint and blame, and he's right. That's the best part, sir.
Well, every move has a context, basically, and I have reviewed and written about Pakistan's foreign policy starting 1948, when Pakistan received an invitation, Pakistani Prime Minister received an invitation from the former Soviet Union, and we waited. We did not respond. Our Prime Minister did not go there, and we waited another year and a half to finally receive an invitation from the Americans, and we went there. The rationale then was that we wanted democracy in this country, that unfortunately, trying to shake hands across 15,000 kilometers of stormy and turbulent waters, has not helped Pakistan at all. At best, we have been able to cultivate a transactional or transitory relationship with the Americans. It was never a stable, dependable, sustainable relationship.
It was always transactional, sir, from the first
On
day.
the other hand, and I'm coming to your question basically, on the other hand, the Chinese friendship, our friendship with China, has always been a dependable and sustainable relationship which has grown with the passage of time. And there were never any question marks either from Pakistani side or from the Chinese side. Today, it's a formidable bond, strategic bond, which sort of has brought the two countries together, and they operate as one virtually. So the comparison that you talk about actually does not exist. You see, the balance that you talk about actually does not exist, because everything must have a rational basis. There is no rational basis for me to say that, look, bulk of the people, educated people in this country are considerably westernized, all right? In spite of that, if somebody like me, is supposed to say that, look, time really has come for us to decide. We say that we're not going to play bloc politics, all right? That's okay. But we will have to take positions, with regard to the interest of Pakistan. And that interest of Pakistan has been served much better, much more adequately through our relationship, through our friendship, through our strategic partnership with China than it has ever been through our relationship with America. And let's not forget the fact, that we still remain the non-NATO ally of the Americans, in spite of the fact that all policies emanating from the Americans are virtually targeting Pakistan and Pakistan's interests. Still, we remain a non-NATO ally. This, in a different way, speaks of the American duplicity there. Basically, they should face the fact, that either the policies have to be reviewed and they become friendly towards Pakistan. Like you said, India is their friend in this part of the world. They've said it repeatedly. Their presidents have said it, that India is going to look after their interests. And those interests are what? Those interests are looking as a big brother on Pakistan and trying to contain China. So, and at the same time, they want Pakistan to play a subsidiary role under the hegemony of India. So these things are not going to happen, and I think maybe there is something wrong in the people who conceive the American policy. If they think that Pakistan could play a subsidiary role, to Indian influence in this part of the world, that is really not going to happen. We may be a smaller country, we may be 1/5 the size of India, but we definitely will try to maintain parity with them. And there are multiple reasons why we have to do it. We have constantly felt to be under threat from the Indian roller coaster, and I think that reality has not changed. I know there's little time, so it's important that the Americans look at their policy for this part of the world, and they look at India and Pakistan separately rather than together. We are not going to play subservient to India, and we are not going to allow India to, act the hegemon here. Similarly, we are going to remain close to China. We are going to further increase and expand our relationship with them. So, we've come to a point where I think Prime Minister's frankness and candid discussion possibly is going to help Pakistan much more than playing the usual cosmetic politics.
Now, sir, last 1 minute for you, Khan Sahab, and that is about a very important development. 5 permanent members in the Security Council, and then the 10 of them, the other ones. India was one of them, obviously, and they abstained their vote. They did not vote against the Russians, regarding this Ukrainian crisis. At the same time, the kind of influence the Indians have over the Americans. S-400 missile system they bought, and there were a couple of statements which were issued by Mr. Blinken. Nothing else happened. F-35 deal with the Turkish, it has been cancelled just because, and even when they wanted to give us the helicopters, those engines were imported from the Americans, and they did not give that so that Pakistan might not get it either. Now, things are very clear, very, very clear. The point is that Now, I think we will eventually, one day or the other, will become a part of the bloc, and that bloc is going to be the Eastern Bloc.
Look, Faisal, I think we have to make this situation completely de-emotionalized. Unfortunately, most of the time when we are talking about the American and the Chinese, so a lot of emotional getting into these affairs. I think this is a very tightrope walking at the moment, and definitely we expect our leadership to be, instead of being saying one thing and referring to another thing, I think this is the time that Pakistan come up with a balanced approach, because it's also it will also be wrong to say that we completely shift toward Chinese and forget about the Americans or the Western part. Look, Pakistan has invested, I think, almost 70 years in having relations with the West and with the US. We have a lot of capital in the West and the US, definitely. We have a lot of too many things we shared during the bad days, during the worst days. We were friends and we were fools, etc. So it's a lot of, I think, it's a lot of ups and downs in the US and Pakistan relation, no doubt. But it doesn't mean that at this moment of time, if something is happening at our neighbors, especially in Afghanistan, and now the relations between the two are lows, so it doesn't mean that we opt for another. We definitely, with China, we have a different sort of relation. As I said, it's no more in rhetorics. It's gone deeper into the villages and the cities and I think the towns of Pakistan. But at the moment also, we have to make this tightrope walking, I think, possible, that how to balance it. At least publicly, if not that much, definitely Chinese has gone too much in Pakistan. But Americans were also not that unkind with us, I will use unkind, during the last 70 years. So I will suggest that we need a balancing, I think, a balanced policy and de-emotionalize, not too much talking of negatives, I think. We have positives with the West, we have too many positives with the US, and we have a lot of positive with the Chinese. So I think we have to work on these positives instead of going to the...
All right, so last...
That's one thing. See, balance must have a context, and there's no context for a balance here, number one. Number two, we must make sure that we separate the US from West. They do different things, basically. When we have bad relations with the US, it doesn't mean that we are going to have bad relations with the all.
But influence is always
there,
sir, unfortunately. But
definitely,
anyway,
right?
sir,
So,
I think that is another very important topic, sir. You just, in fact, mentioned about it. But I think, yes, when we look at the Western world, I mean, we look at it from a very different perspective. Canada, Australia even, European Union, or Quad for that matter.
EU.
Yeah, EU.
UK.
Yeah, absolutely. But anyway, sir, thank you so much, Khan Saab. Thank you so much, Raoof Saab, for your presence.
Always a pleasure. Thank you,
Always
Faisal.
great to have you on the show, sir. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you inshallah tomorrow at 8:05. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.